Yeah, hi everybody. My presentation is on the particular ethical dilemma related to a vulnerable person. Do you have a license to deny? So, can you deny, for instance, treatment or providing counseling to a person who, I guess, whoever you want, I guess? And so this is difficult because the ACA Code A4 I'm referencing here is avoiding harm to others applies to this case. My person that I'm talking about is actually a friend and not from any other than just a friend of mine. Her name is Amber W., and she identified as a transgender person. Obviously, people who are identify as transgender have identity struggles, and people are usually very cruel to them. And then when the cruel gaze of the community is placed on them, that sort of self-hatred kind of absorbs into her body, into her soul. And she was, when I met her, she was extremely depressed, even suicidal. And about 2 years after that, she ended up dying by suicide. But she told me a story about how a counselor refused to see her. And so I wanted to address this here because I think it's something we're all going to run into. Can we kind of refuse whoever based on whatever? And that's actually an interesting question. So she was vulnerable because she's, number one, a victim of stigma, and there's a lot of violence against her as well. And even a counselor refusing to see her seems to me to be an act of violence and an act of harm. And, all of this these sorts of things, microaggressions or whatever you might have that are placed on her or directed at her, results in a lot of depression, and obviously suicide is incredibly high among this group of individuals. So it is actually a very sad situation. So Amber challenges this though because she requires us to bend our definition of how we see things. For instance, difference and the same, and those kind of binary categories we create in the world. So on the one hand, we have male, female, man, woman, girl, boy, black, white. I mean, we could go on, and I think that limits people's thinking. And anything that doesn't meet the expectation has to be isolated, has to be put aside, has to be put sort of like the lonely sheep in the pasture. So it actually asks us to look inside, and it demands that we also learn self-love. Because for me, when it comes to loving others, I know the Bible says, love your neighbor as yourself, but if you don't love yourself, you can't love anybody, and you don't know how to distinguish that as well. So to me, really, Eric Fromm actually said something like, love is the answer to humanity's problems, but actually it's really self-love. And because if you don't love yourself, nothing's going to happen in the world that's good. Okay, so in this case, the ethical dilemma or counselor, the counselor has personal or religious beliefs against transgender person and doesn't want to see them. So the ACA stance on that, and this is really interesting, actually. Once I got into it, it was really a unique situation because across the country, like 35 different states have anti-transgender laws or anti-gay, LGBTQT plus sort of stuff. And they're just anti this and that. So I think it was in 2017, the state of Tennessee, and that's where I live, the governor put a law, a mandate in effect saying that you can refuse whoever you want. Okay, and that included transgender people, gay people, anybody. So, and that's a problem because the ACA conference was going to go on at that time down in the Expo Center in Nashville, and it didn't happen because the ACA canceled it. Well, why did they cancel it? Because let me read you a quote. ACA CEO Richard Yep states, "This is a full frontal attack on specific populations that some very conservative right wings in the United States want to exclude from mental health services that they desperately need." He says the new law will permit a counselor to reject an individual simply because of the provider's beliefs and values. ACA and its code, and it's very important here. The code of ethics are very clear that counselors do not bring those beliefs and values into the counseling relationship. So it really shouldn't matter, because competent counselors, competent professionals are going to be able to separate that. In this case, we have somebody imposing their view on another person, which I guess is against the autonomy ethical concept as well. So the person should be able to self-determine and all this. We're supposed to allow that to happen. And in fact, we're supposed to promote their growth, the person's growth, to be able to live freely and independently. So this is actually very concerning. And then you go, well, how's that going to shake out with the Supreme Court? Well, the Supreme Court ruled in 2015 that states must recognize the validity of like same-sex marriage in those cases, right? But at the same time, it also served as a clarion to cause those determined to continue discriminatory policies. So there was actually a student, let me find that right here. There was a student at a school who actually refused, and the school put him out, and then they got sued pretty bad and lost with the Supreme Court. So it's actually quite a sad situation. So really, we got a big conflict between the ACA on the one hand and also actual laws that override them. But typically speaking, if the ACA is the determining body, you would think that they could do that. But if with the Supreme Court ruling, it kind of puts it in a kind of no man's land. So, but it is really interesting. The things we can do, like when people come in, we're sort of, we're always looking at this microaggressions. Are we doing it? Are we, inadvertently doing it? Are we unintentionally doing it? And I think it's something that's going to have to be very important as well, is for people to understand what their prejudices and beliefs are. And I think actually, I know this is ethics class, but the multicultural class does a pretty good job of that. Actually, I've enjoyed that class a great deal. And then also I have attached at the end in the references all these sources, but also the ALGBTIC competencies for counseling transgender clients. So if you go there, that you can read a document in a PDF form where they actually you can read up on how the ACA actually specifically wants you to help transgender clients in a professional way. So obviously when it comes down to the ACA, you can't impose your beliefs, but there's laws out there, so it's going to be hard to actually enforce that, I think. I think that's interesting, and maybe our instructor can comment on that. I would appreciate it. So so this is actually a very interesting situation. So how can we help? Well, obviously we want to do our whatever our mission is. What's your mission? And it should correspond with your mission. For me, I participate in marches. I go on and on about this subject, especially in relation to transgender people. Let me tell you, it's a sad situation how we treat people. And I know we do it everywhere, but this group seems to get it worse than anyone. Something like up to 50% of people who identify as transgender die by suicide. It's a very sad situation. So what we have to do is think expansively. Open up our mind and live with an openness, live with self-love, okay? And that's really what it comes down to. And that's my life mantra is from now forward, self-love. I don't care about this neighbor stuff. If you don't love yourself, you aren't going to be able to love anybody. Anyway, I hope everybody enjoyed this. You can see the references in my document as well, so I appreciate everybody listening to me. And I think I went over too, so I apologize for that. Okay, night.